All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the December 21, 2023 regular village board meeting. First order of business is a roll call. Village Manager Crowley, would you call the roll?
Trustee Hallwack.
Here.
Trustee Listner.
Here.
Trustee Mealopoulos.
Here.
Trustee Underdunk.
Here.
Trustee Rubin.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
President Rowan.
Here. Trustee Mealopoulos has requested to join the meeting via telephone because she has a conflict that complies with the village's remote meetings policy. I want to confirm that the board agrees to accommodate her remote participation, and we've set it up so everyone can hear her. We don't need a motion or anything like that, but if someone objects, now's your last chance. Okay. Nobody objects.
She will be called as part of the vote.
We're live streaming this meeting. We posted the links to the live stream on the village's social media pages. We'll make the recording available on the village's YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting. First item on the agenda after calling the roll is consideration of the minutes. We circulated the minutes and we published them online. The minutes are the committee of the whole for November 16th, 2023, and the Board of Trustees regular meeting on November 16th, 2023. Are there any comments on the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve them?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is public comments. This part of the meeting allows for those in attendance of the meeting to address issues that are not on our regular agenda. I'll ask for public comments that relate to the agenda to be discussed when we get there on the agenda. All comments are limited to 3 minutes. I'll notify the speaker when your time is up. In the interest of sort of the shortness of the life, I'll limit the total public comments on any non-agenda item to 15 minutes. Are there any non-agenda comments tonight? Yeah, I don't see any. The next item on the agenda is the swearing in of Public Safety Officer Alexander White. I'll ask our Public Safety Director, Chief Lockren, to introduce Officer White.
So I have the pleasure of providing you
Officer White, before you go, let me just say on behalf of the village board, welcome. We are so proud of our public safety department, and we feel lucky that you'll be joining it. And Glencoe, the public safety officer, is your friend. They've demonstrated. I've lived in this town almost my whole life, and they've demonstrated that every day. And we're confident with officers like you that will continue. So welcome. We're proud to have you. Your family should be proud that you're here. Yeah. So the next item on the agenda is reports of committees. I will be particularly brief about the committee of the whole since we didn't have one of those. Next, the report is the Finance Committee, Trustee Rubin.
We have one of those items. So, I could ask our Chief Financial Officer, Deputy Village Manager, and Acting Director.
Thank you. Okay, just a few notes. Included on tonight's agenda is item 8A, the November 2023 Treasurer's Report. Just a few notes for the month of November. As of the end of the month, general fund performance for a number of the village's revenue sources exceeded both monthly budget targets and prior year receipts, which has been consistent with performance throughout the year, including property taxes. We're finally getting tax receipts, which is wonderful news for us. Income taxes, building permits, parking fees, water and sewer charges, and both our state and local fuel taxes. The village has started to see property taxes from the second installment of tax bills, which was, as we have talked about for the last several meetings, had a delayed due date of December 1st. At this point, as of today, we're on track to end the year approximately $100,000 under budget on property taxes, but there are still 2 weeks left in the year. So there's definitely time to close that gap. We just have seen significant delays with the distributions from Cook County. On the expenditure side, all funds are within budgetary targets, although the village is still working through elevated levels of the costs of certain supplies and services, as you heard about in great detail when we prepared the 2024 budget. Despite these increases, the general fund is on track to end the current fiscal year with over $1 million surplus, which is great news for us. And lastly, I'm happy to report that as of tomorrow, the pickup of our aerial truck will conclude every vehicle and large piece of equipment that was included in the 23-year budget. So we will finally receive everything, which I think is the first time this has happened in 2 years. So it's a good finish for 23. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions, but thank you. Finance Director Larson. Okay, the next report is the report of the Plan Commission. Trustee Listener is our representative on the plan. Okay. Thanks for that report. The next report is the Golf Advisory Committee, and Trustee Hallwax is our representative on that. And I note that I think we all got an email saying that there was golf still going on.
Yeah, that was Mother Nature was kind. So the year ended up with 43,500 rounds played, which wasn't a record, but it's still it's an incredible amount. Perhaps more importantly, net operating income is going to break all previous records and is going to come in around $700,000. So the golf course is closed, but the indoor teaching has been set up inside the clubhouse. And then with regard to the clubhouse, on the clubhouse project, the work is still in progress, and staff is working with architects and also the project manager doing the surveys and the soil borings, which have been completed. And now we are in the design development stage. So we'll be updating more on that next meeting.
Thanks for that report. Next is the Sustainability Task Force. Trustee Nicolopoulos, I hope you can hear us. Assuming you can hear us, you'll report on the Sustainability Task Force.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, so we did have a meeting this month. Just wanted to report that on Thursday, December 7th, the village was recognized by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus for the achievement of bronze designation in the EV Readiness Program. This first-of-its-kind program recognizes communities that have taken steps to develop permitting for EV charging infrastructure, conduct training for local staff, and implement plans that engage the community and ensure safe integration of zero-emission vehicles. Glencoe was one of 12 municipalities in Illinois that are the first in the U.S. to be designated as a quote-unquote EV-ready community. So we're very excited about that. In our meeting just a few days ago, we also reviewed and discussed sustainability-related efforts for the proposed 2024 budget, and the task force discussed plans for the end-of-year communication initiatives. And our next meeting in the new year is scheduled for January 23rd. Thank you.
Thanks for that report. The next report is the Council for Inclusion and Community, and our representative on that is Trustee Scott.
Hi there. We had a very brief meeting on December 5th, and we recapped the Light the Lights event with very positive feedback and discussed subcommittee structures and assignments to help facilitate the Council's work in '24. Next meeting will be on January 10th at 5:30.
Thanks for that report. And the next report is the Preservation Commission. Trustee Onderdunk is our representative on the Preservation.
Thank you. The Preservation Commission met on Tuesday, December 5th at 5:30 p.m. During the public comment period, Brad Schumann of 128 Crescent Drive expressed concern about the removal of trees for new construction at 219 Lincoln, his neighbor to the rear. He said that at least 16 trees had been cut down on the site and in the adjacent ravine. A new ugly wall was added which scars the beauty of the ravine. He said the entire neighborhood was upset. The Commission suggested that village staff reevaluate the project to make sure it meets all applicable village codes, especially setbacks and steep slopes. The present code may need to be amended. Mr. Sherman was encouraged to contact the Sustainability Task Force and express his concerns to the village board. It was felt that the Sustainability Task Force would be more appropriate than the Preservation Commission to deal with this particular issue. The Commission also reviewed a demolition permit for a ranch-style home at 759 Strawberry Hill and decided to take no action. They did discuss the need to update our historic home survey to include homes built between 1946 and 1986. The Commission also discussed the outcome of the joint meeting with the Zoning Commission. The Zoning Commission generally supported the ideas of historic preservation incentives, but their primary concern was the impact that potential bonuses would have on neighboring property. There was a consensus that it would be okay for the Preservation Commission to make a recommendation to the Zoning Commission as to the appropriateness of an application. Chairman Van Vetchen volunteered to work with staff on drafting text amendments and review by the village attorney. Finally, the Commission discussed a certificate of appropriateness for a fence replacement at 750 Glencoe Drive, a landmark property. This will be the subject of a public hearing in January, and the next meeting will be Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. Thank you.
Thanks for that report, and I think probably would be useful for the village manager to say something about the property dispute that you were talking about with the ravine and trees.
Certainly President Rowan and Trustee Underdunk and the board. Staff did meet with Mr. Schulman as well as a number of his neighbors on site last week to review his concerns and talk through the items that he had shared with the Preservation Commission and had shared also with President Rowan and myself. A couple of points to make. We did talk through the village's ordinance structure as they relate to both preservation of the slope as well as our tree preservation ordinance. The trees that were removed on the site, no doubt there were a number of them, but they were cataloged by the village's tree consultant, and a $31,500 deposit was made for any of the trees that were removed that otherwise were not ailing or dead already. We talked through that with him and were able to share some of the way the village approaches our tree preservation ordinance. We did talk through also the retaining wall in question, and we have committed to be working with the developer to find ways to screen it additionally, perhaps as part of the replanting that will take place on the site once the property is finished. The house is still very early in its construction stages. The wall itself is also more massive in the way that it looks right now because it has not been backfilled yet. And that being said, there are certainly concerns that the neighbors expressed that we were able to talk through and take notes relative to. But it was very productive discussion with Mr. Schulman, and we'll continue to dialogue with him, his neighbors, as well as the developer who's building 219 Lincoln.
And let me just say one thing about another item that Trustee Underdunk mentioned, which is the Preservation Commission working with the zoning board to try to figure out what to do about historic properties. That's an interdisciplinary question, and it's excellent that they're both talking to each other, and the goal is to find a way that we can serve our preservation interests and at the same time not cause neighbors to feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. And I'll throw out one other complication, which is there are, as we think of solutions, we're not home rule community, and so what we can do in zoning is limited. And I'll take this opportunity to mention, maybe every time it comes up, we can do less for our residents because we're not a home rule community. Okay, that concludes the reports of our committees. The next item on the agenda is the reports of officers, and first, the report of the village manager.
Good evening, everyone. My report this evening will be brief. Just a couple of things to note. This will be will not be news for anyone who's been following the village's budget process over the last several months, as we talked somewhat extensively about the fact that there is some fairly significant organizational changes that will take effect with this new budget that's being considered this evening. I just wanted to make mention of a couple of them. Perhaps the most significant change is a reorganization that is merging the operations of the village manager's office and the finance department into a single department of administration and finance. That will be led by our current finance director, Nikki Larson, who will be promoted to deputy village manager, chief financial officer. Our current assistant village manager, Sharon Tanner, is being transitioned into the village's first human resources director, a position that we have long wanted to see in this organization, and I think will be a significant benefit to us as we continue to seek to be an employer of choice and to retain a really high-performing workforce. I think anyone who's worked with the village team has been impressed by them, and it is our goal to keep that functional and operational. There are a couple of new positions that are being considered as part of the budget, a human resources generalist that will support the HR director, as well as transition to some new to a new IT structure. As you know, Ron Dessard, who was our longtime IT coordinator, retired earlier this month. Our new technology and strategy manager, Mario Gill, who I don't think is in the room right now, but all of our trustees have been working with over the last week or so, took over and is doing just a great job. We are thrilled he's on our team. We are also seeking a support and network engineer, a second full-time IT professional that will take the place of a part-time contractual solution that the village currently has. We have gotten some questions this week because we are advertising for an assistant village manager position. That is likewise a restructured position within the organization. Our current assistant to the village manager, John Pape, was going to transition into that role, but John has accepted a position with another great community. He's going to be leaving Glencoe in mid-January, and so we are working hard to try to fill shoes that are going to be very difficult to fill. One last note, and this is one that we have had kind of in an interim structure for the last 6 months or so. Historically, our building, zoning, and planning functions have been housed within the Public Works Department, but for a long time we've been talking about whether that's the right structure on a going forward basis. With Dave Mao retiring as Public Works Director earlier this year and Monica Sarna coming in October, the timing was right to separate Development Services from Public Works into its own standalone department. The new Development Services department's going to be led by Director Taylor Baxter. Taylor's been in a leadership role for about 4 years here with the village, but will step into this new role January 1st as well. So we're moving some things around, a lot of the same faces, some new names will be added into the mix. We are likewise going to be moving some furniture around the building on the first floor over the first 2 months of 2024, but a lot to be excited about, and I'm very much looking forward to this new organizational structure that I think is going to serve our community exceptionally well. My only other item is to note that due to the Christmas and New Year's federal holidays that are coming up next week and the following week, Village Hall will be closed both Monday, December 25th and Monday, January 1st. Garbage collection that would normally take place on Mondays will take place on Tuesdays. Typical Tuesday garbage collection will move to Wednesday, but the rest of the week will remain the same. And we just wish everyone from the village staff a very happy holiday season, and especially a wonderful and happy and healthy 2024. We look forward to seeing everybody in January. That is it for my report tonight.
Thanks for that report. Before we segue over to the President's report, we're going to have more to say about this next month. But let me say, on behalf of the board, John, because everybody else, our board members talk about staying, you're not. We have, you've been great. I think we're sorry to see you go. Upland State's a very lucky place to have you. But I just want to say it's been our pleasure to work with you. You're exactly the kind of employee that sets the high standards that Glencoe, we've always set and met. And in your case,
And John will still be here at the January board meeting, so people can embarrass him exceptionally well then if you want. We have a whole month to think about how to roast John.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the village president's report. We have a total of one item, which is the appointment of Deborah Lammers to the Preservation Commission for a term expiring on May 2026. She is shockingly qualified and is excited to step into this role. And I would ask for a motion to approve Deborah Lammers to the Preservation Commission.
I'll move it.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Deborah Lambert is on the Preservation Commission. That concludes the President's report. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing and consideration of an ordinance making appropriations for the corporate purposes of the Village of Glencoe for calendar year beginning January 1, 2024 and ending December 31, 2024. Let me start by opening the hearing, and I'll ask our Finance Director, soon to be promoted to a different, similar job, and our Assistant, Nikki Larson, and our Assistant Finance Director, also getting a slightly different job, Margaret Schwartz, to present. Nikki.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Included on tonight's agenda are a number of items related to the 2024 budget and appropriations process. Notice of this hearing was published in the Glencoe News on December 7th. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time just reviewing each one of these and how they relate to each other. We'll start with item 7, which is the public hearing on the appropriations ordinance, and then we'll review items in section 8, D through I. Okay, starting with item 7, on the agenda is the village appropriations ordinance, which sets our legal limit of spending. It's based on the line item budget that was reviewed by the village board in November of this year. The total amount of appropriations is based off of 110% of the line item budgeted amount. So looking from left to right, you'll see what's proposed as part of the calendar year 2024 approved budget or proposed budget, and what the appropriation would be based off of 110% of that. This basically gives the village a little bit of flexibility on our spending authority to make sure that we do not exceed what is defined as our legal limit. We adopt this appropriations ordinance each year, and as a non-home rule unit, those appropriations lapse at the close of the calendar year. Oh, I'm sorry, I would be remiss not to note the library is also included in this item, so you will see that the total dollar amount at the bottom of the screen is slightly larger than what you will see in our proposed budget because the library does their own budget. So total, what we are proposing for appropriations is $67,035,854. The next item included in this group is item 8B, on the agenda. This is the calendar year 2024 budget ordinance. This process started back in August with a review of the financial policies of the village with the Finance Committee, and continued through discussions in September and October on the village's financial forecast. Those two items really set the tone for the budget as a whole and put essentially guardrails around the future for the staff to prepare a proposed budget for you. Also included in the budget process is a 10-year CIP that sets the direction for our capital program. Also the tax levy and the draft budget review, that all happened in November as well. Total operating fund budget as proposed is $43.5 million in revenue and $53.6 million in expenditures. There is a significant use of reserves and bond proceeds proposed to this budget, so it is important to note that even though you have a significant difference there between revenue and expenditure, the village's budget is balanced in accordance with our policy, which requires operating revenues to be equal to or more than our operating expenditures, which is true across all funds. There are one-time drawdowns in accordance with the village's policy that are allowed for one-time capital expenditures. So essentially you are not using recurring revenue to balance the budget for recurring expenditures. There are one-time uses of capital in the general fund, motor fuel tax, and the golf club fund. Also use of bond proceeds. The proposed budget does include 2 additional bond issues next year. Those will fund additional capital improvements in the capital fund and the golf club fund. And then the 10-year program really kind of illustrates the focus of this year's budget, which is just continued reinvestment into the community and our infrastructure. The 10-year plan is now proposing $77.4 million in infrastructure improvements, with $21 million proposed in 2024. Large difference there really being the approval of the golf club referendum and the addition of that project. Some other significant projects that are proposed next year are enhanced water infrastructure projections, also a $3 million stormwater project to help us control stormwater throughout the village. I apologize, this is a little small on the screen, but this is in more detail in the packet and also in the proposed budget online. Working from left to right, you can see the breakdown of the proposed budget by fund, what is proposed in revenue and expense, and again, any drawdown that you see here noted as a deficit would be those one-time drawdowns for one-time capital projects. If everything goes as planned, which you'll hear later doesn't ever happen, but what we are projecting at the close of 2024 would be ending the year with this proposed budget as is, with 6 months of operating expenditures in reserve in our general fund and just over 7 months in our water fund. We have been purposefully aggregating reserves in those two funds to fund the capital program, which allows us to increase that 10-year number significantly. And just a note for anyone that's watching at home, the budget agenda packet item does have a link to the proposed budget as well as all of the detail surrounding this. The next budget-related item is item E. This is consideration of the tax year 23 property tax levy. This is collected in 2024. There's always a 1-year lag. This does attach, if approved tonight, 2 homes in Glencoe as of December for collection throughout the year next year. The requested levy as presented recommends a 5.7% increase over last year, which is roughly about $600,000. That excludes debt service, and debt service would have been approved when the board would have approved the original bond issue. This also includes the library levy, and you will note that the increase is slightly higher than 5%, which is the maximum that is allowable under the property tax extension limit law. So we do anticipate that the submission of this levy will be adjusted accordingly by the county to what is the maximum allowable by law. This tax levy was presented to the Finance Committee in October, and we also held a property tax hearing in the month of November. Presented twice, understanding that the village is requesting just slightly higher than a 5% increase, despite the fact that the year-over-year CPI increase in the cost of goods was 6.5%. So we are recommending this increase to help the village cover the increased cost of operations next year. Moving right along, item number F is the Washington Place Special Service Area Levy. This item is on the agenda each year for a special service area that was created in 2015. The special service area was created to pay for private road improvements that is subsequently paid back through the village. Because this special service area is structured so that each property owner repays the dollars that went into the improvements, the village does administer this locally. It's not administered by the county. But nevertheless, we do require an ordinance just to signify and memorialize the annual levy, which is about $25,000, and that will run through 2030. And at this moment, I'm going to pass this over to Assistant Finance Director Margaret Schwartz, who is, as President Rowan noted, also about to receive a promotion.
Thank you, Director Larson. Item G on the consent agenda is the fee and fine schedule resolution. As part of the budget development process, staff annually reviews various fees, fines, and charges for villages services. The calendar year 2024 budget includes several proposed changes to the fees. First, we have the water rates are increasing by 7%, which is in line with the water rate study assumptions that we have each year. Sanitary sewer rates are increasing 5%, to cover costs related to mandates made by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. There are $3.9 million of scheduled infrastructure improvements over the next 10 years as well. The general collection service fee is increasing by 5%, which is consistent with the 12-month change in CPI that is used for the property tax levy. And vehicle license fees and motorcycle tags are increasing from $50 to $60 each, and senior rates will increase from $25 to $30 each. The village water system connection labor fee will increase to $300, and all water connection fees specific to service line sizes will be charged on a progressive rate schedule that will cover the village's actual cost plus for 15% for the administrative costs. The building permit per square foot cost will increase from $7.15 to $7.50 per square foot. The tree replacement fee for non-heritage trees is going to be $175 per caliper inch, and the tree replacement fee for heritage trees is going to be $350 per caliper inch. The revision fee for approved permits will increase to $150 plus $150 per hour after 2 hours of review, and this is to cover the cost of when an approved permit is modified. The electric vehicle charging station prices will reflect market prices of electricity in the 2024 year. And some of our golf club rates will also slightly increase and continue to reflect a dynamic pricing structure. The details of all the increases and changes can be found in your board packet, starting on page 141. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Are there any questions? Not for lack of interest, we have talked about all of this
Yes.
in public meetings. Thanks for that report, and my instructor Larson for your very clear report. There's more. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Just one more quick item. So item H on the consent agenda is the multi-year contracts resolution. As part of our budget process, the village reviews all of our multi-year contracts greater than $25,000, and we bring them before the board for review and approval in accordance with the village's purchasing policy to ensure transparency. These contracts and payments are routine, and funds for these contracts are included in the calendar year 2024 budget. If you have any questions about the contract, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Okay, now we're in the home stretch. Last one. So the last budget-related item is item I. This is the supplemental appropriations and budget amendment, and that should actually say, calendar year 2023. This is done in accordance with the village's policies. As much as we try to anticipate changing circumstances throughout the year, certainly the budget is a fluid document and circumstances do change. This year we are requesting an additional almost $2.6 million in spending authority for items that have popped up throughout the year that we have discussed with the board. Typically what we do is wait until the very end of the year to take a look at those requests. Obviously we're looking at the village's finances on a monthly basis. We wouldn't bring something before you that we don't know that we can cover with resources. And then at the end of the year what we do is a true up on our books to make sure that everything matches and that the resources are available, and identify that with the county to just formalize those changes. The good news in the additional expenditure request is that there are resources available to cover all of this and more, so that all of those have been identified in the packet. In the packet there is a detailed outline of all of the items that have caused changes in what we were anticipating versus what actually happened. Some of those being overtime for staffing shortages, unexpected projects that have come up, whether they're capital or engineering, traffic studies, plan review. I think we all remember the holiday lights, and expenditures related to the lead service line program. That was just kind of the first year of this program. And also another significant change here is the approval of the golf club referendum, which was uncertain at the time of the budget adoption. Now that that's passed, that has been incorporated. Any expenditures that we've had this year have been incorporated to this budget. So the important thing is, even though we're adding spending authority of almost $2.6 million, the net impact to the budget is zero because we do have resources available to cover all of these items. So this does conclude the presentation of the budget items. I do want to take a moment just to thank the board for all of your patience, your time with us as we work through a 300-page budget document. We do appreciate all of the time that you spent and all the thought that you put into this. I want to thank the village staff for all the time that they spent on this, particularly Assistant Finance Director Schwarz. Our Accounts Receivable Coordinator, Mike Wiedner, is here as well. He spent many hours assembling the budget document with us. So I just want to thank everyone for their time and their input in making this possible. And I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the items.
Before we ask you questions, it's a public hearing. So, are there any questions or comments from the public about our appropriations ordinance or any of the things that our finance directors talked about? I don't see any. As you said, we've talked about all of this at length. Are there any other questions from the board about items that our esteemed finance directors have talked about? Okay. Is there a motion to close the public hearing? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I think we probably need a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Mealopoulos?
Yes.
Trustee Underdunk?
Yes.
Trustee Rubin?
Yes.
Trustee Scott?
Yes.
The public hearing is closed. Now that we've talked about it, had the public hearing, is there a motion to approve the appropriations ordinance?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's have a roll call on that, please.
Trustee Hallwax?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Mealopoulos?
Yes.
Trustee Underdunk?
Yes.
Trustee Rubin?
Yes.
Trustee Scott?
Yes.
The motion to approve the appropriation ordinance is granted. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that have been published online for the community. They've been reviewed by the board individually or together as part of our committee process, the committee of the whole. We don't think they require any further public discussion. There is one exception I want to call out. On the consent agenda, item 6B is one in which Trustee Scott has an equity interest in one of the village's vendors. So, out of an abundance of caution, we're going to remove that item from the consent agenda. We'll deal with that separately. That enables Trustee Scott to vote on the consent agenda. I would note that Trustee Scott's financial interest falls below the requirements for recusal, but on advice of counsel, we're having that happen anyway. So, is there a motion, combined motion, to remove item 6B from the consent agenda and then to approve the remainder of the consent agenda, which is published online and in the board packet? Is there such a motion?
So, second.
It's been moved and seconded, so let's have a roll call on the consent agenda.
Trustee Hallwax?
Yes.
Trustee Listner? Trustee Mealopoulos?
Yes.
Trustee Underdunk? Trustee Rubin?
Yes.
Trustee Scott?
Yes.
The consent agenda is passed. The next item on the agenda is regular business. The first item on that is the check register. This is without Trustee Scott appearing, and this is the check register. I think this is 6B.
It's actually 8B,
8B.
because of the agenda adjusted, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
8B. Unless anyone wants to talk about it, is there a motion to approve this part of the check register? Okay, let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax? Trustee Listner. Trustee Mealopoulos.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk. Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Okay, that takes care of that item. Welcome back, Trustee Scott. The next item on the agenda is consideration of an ordinance establishing paid leave policies for the Village of Glencoe. And don't memorize her title, but I'll ask Assistant Village Manager Sharon Tanner to present.
Thank you, President Rowan, and good evening, members of the board. This evening, we have for your consideration an ordinance establishing and essentially codifying our existing local paid leave policies that are set forth in the employee handbook, our collective bargaining agreements, and any employment agreements that the village may enter into, and as those may be changed from time to time. Oops, I went the wrong way. Apologize there. While the village has historically adopted or updated its paid leave policies through those documents that I just mentioned by resolution, this evening we're recommending that you consider an ordinance as a new step to address the Illinois Paid Leave for All Workers Act. Earlier this year, the General Assembly passed and Governor Pritzker signed into law the Paid Leave for All Workers Act with an implementation date of January 1st, 2024. The legislative process on this particular piece of legislation moved extremely quickly, with it being introduced and passed in both chambers in about a day. So it was a very rapid movement through the State House. The Act expressly applies to local governments such as Glencoe, but notably exempted park districts and school districts from its scope. The Act requires most employers in Illinois to provide at least 40 hours of paid leave that can be used for any reason, and it includes a few safe harbors that I've listed on the slide and will briefly talk through. First is existing paid leave policies that provide for at least 40 hours of paid leave that can be used for any reason. And I will note when I say 40 hours, that is possible to be prorated based upon an employee's full-time equivalency. There's also a safe harbor for collective bargaining agreements that are in effect on January 1st, 2024. And the State Act also provided a safe harbor for local paid leave ordinances that require any form of paid leave. And as we were preparing a proposed approach for the board to address this act, Cook County passed its own paid leave ordinance late last week, which is also applicable to municipalities within the county. The county's ordinance becomes effective on December 31st, 2023. So I've included a side-by-side here on the screen because these two pieces of legislation are rather similar, but they do have a few distinct differences. One of which is the safe harbors. The first two that I had mentioned for the State Act are also in the county's ordinance, that being safe harbors for existing paid leave policies and existing collective bargaining agreements that are in effect on January 1st, though notably the county ordinance does not create a safe harbor for local paid leave laws requiring any form of paid leave. The village has a long history of providing its full-time employees with competitive leave benefits that are intended to support the well-being of employees and also allowing the village to continue delivering excellent and efficient municipal services in a financially responsible manner. And the village has not historically provided paid leave benefits to part-time, seasonal, and temporary employees. However, we are required to do so under both the State Act and the Cook County Ordinance. I should mention that in the State Act, the state did not make the necessary appropriations to implement the ordinance, and nor did they include language in the statute that would be required to otherwise exempt the act from the Illinois Mandates Act. So that creates an unfunded mandate that is imposed upon the village in order for us to implement the act. It also creates operational and financial burdens that the village must resolve. Many suburbs, such as some of our neighboring communities that have home rule authority, pass their own local ordinances to opt out of the State Act. However, Glencoe, as a non-home rule municipality, does not have that option available. Another point that's important to mention is that there's very limited guidance available about both the State Act and the county ordinance. The state has issued some guidance in pieces over the last several months in the form of frequently asked questions, as well as a set of draft regulations, which it expects to have final regulations in place in March of 2024, so a couple of months after the effective date of the act. Likewise, the county has also very recently passed its own ordinance, and there is not a lot of information available just yet. And the county, on a call earlier this week, shared that they expect to have draft regulations also in the March timeframe of 2024. So within that limited guidance that's available, our staff, the village attorney, and our labor council evaluated both the state act and the county ordinance in order to develop an approach that we could recommend to you this evening. First, our existing paid leave policies and collective bargaining agreements for our full-time employees do satisfy the safe harbors that are in both the county the county ordinance and the state act. Our part-time, temporary, and seasonal employees are the group that we're focused on in resolving. And in the employee handbook, which the board has just approved an update to, we included a policy that provides up to 40 hours of paid leave, prorated as needed based on their full-time equivalency for part-time, temporary, and seasonal employees. By virtue of that being an existing paid leave policy before the effective date of the act and the county ordinance, that will allow us to work within that safe harbor. We are still recommending that the board consider passing a local paid leave ordinance, although that safe harbor is only in the state act, not in the county ordinance, in large part because there is so little information available at this time. We think that there is still value in doing so. It codifies our existing leave policies and still retains the flexibility for the board to adjust those over time, which we can then do by resolution as we have in the past. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks for that report. Just to be clear, what you're proposing that we do is designed to do our best to comply with these two slightly inconsistent laws with your advice and our village attorney's advice.
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody have questions about this? If not, is there a motion to approve the proposed ordinance? Is there a second?
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax. Yes. Trustee Listner. Yes. Trustee Mealopoulos.
Yes.
Trustee Underdunk. Yes. Trustee Rubin. Yes. Trustee Scott.
Yes.
Motion carries. The ordinance is approved. Thanks very much for the hard work from our staff and our village attorney to do our best to handle this curveball. Okay, that concludes our regular business. Is there any other business that anyone wants to raise? If not, we don't have a closed session, so thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.